justification to free time. Rather, I will only address one specific challenge to the claim to free time, which is the economic field of time. So in this field, time is roughly understood exclusively in terms of economic values. And then I will explore the injustice or the social pathologies behind this field. And you can see why they pose some significant challenges to the workers. And so for some remarks is that I will set aside empirical measurement like how to measure the free time and some public policy issues. What exact measures should we implement to give people more free time? And I will exclude some environmental, psychological arguments such like if we work less, and if we earn more free time by working less, we can consume less energy. And so it is good for our environment. So I don't deny there are numerous ways to justify the claim to free time. I will just specifically deal with the challenge, the economic field of time. So the reason I do not begin from a liberal egalitarian theory of justice, because I think the claim to free time is not a matter of distributive justice. It moves towards pre-distribution and institutional changes, which is more forward-looking. And second, without invoking a particular version of social justice that precedes institutional context. And we do not have to expand the egalitarian versions of justice into forms, which is much controversial, like extending the Rawlsian principle of justice in the into the private sphere. And the third reason is that organizations or some private companies and firms can be a distinctive unit of moral concern. We do not stand in a strong political relation with these economic institutions. So obligations of egalitarian reciprocity may not apply here. And the fourth reason is that given the capacity of globalization and international companies, expanding a single theory into the globe may not be appropriate and will be much controversial. And therefore, I will negatively justify the claim to free time by addressing the most fundamental challenge, I think, which is the economic field of time. So you may probably wonder what's the definition of free time. Actually, it's an incomplete and negative definition, which means I don't have a complete account of what free time is. I only need to proceed by specifying that what time is not. So it is negatively defined. It is time over which one has an autonomous control after satisfying the demands of necessities such as paid work, formal or informal work, and household labor or personal cares. So free time roughly in this sense means time when not working. So you may use other terms like leisure time, but I don't like this term because leisure time may presuppose some use of free time. So I will use the free time in a consistent way. You may call it spare time or discretionary time as you like, but I will use free time throughout the whole presentation. So there are some challenges posed by the economic field of time to the claim to free time. The first thesis of the economic field of time is that individual time is reducible to a private property available for market transaction. In brief, the liberal capitalist conception of freedom underpins the economic field of time. Individual time are no longer different from our capacities, talents, and natural endowments. They are ours to use as we see fit due to the original sovereignty over ourselves. Time, though we cannot tangibly own, is individually processed. So you can see the subject of time follows a model of commodity exchange in which time is for sale in the labor market. Selling our labor implies selling the availability of time. So often individuals sell their time as human capital at their will. Let's say Facebook hire me as a data scientist who is required to work for 40 hours a week. My right to process, right to use, and right to the capital value of, and right to the income derived from alternating the use of these 14 hours are transferred to the company. So simply say, we can simply say that money can buy time. That's the first thesis. And the second thesis is that the time in paid labor doing employment principally seeks to generate economic growth and rewards. So money can not only money can buy time. Time itself is of monetary value. Time is money. The value of individual time they process is measured in terms of their performance and productivity. I think it is in part motivated by our capitalist rationality and logic. We target at profit maximizations. That's one reason. And I suspect that it's given the fixed costs, the fixed labor costs, the capitalists, the employers, the companies used to maximize the use of their time, of their labors, of their employees. So what we can derive from these two theses is that the labor, the amount of labor time controlled is not controlled by the labor. The laborers have no discretion over how long one works and when their free time occurs. So if this is this economic view of time stands, on what grounds can workers legitimately have the claim to their fair shares of free time? That's the question I want to address in this paper. So you may call it the commodifications of time. So there are three kinds of structural injustice posed by this view. The first one is a fragmentized worldview. In Habermas language, we can make only reference to one world, the objective world of empirical objects, rather than the other two worlds, the subjective world of personal experience and the intersubjective world of normative commitments. Major consequence is the lost meaning-making imagination of time. Perceptions of a future are eclipsed, followed by the failure to connect our personality and personal projects. They may properly feel that the worker's subjective self belongs to the company when working for them. A point of view from my own life is lost. A worldview without the real nature of agency is neither elevating nor uplifting. We stop making sense of our world from our perspective. With the loss of time extended sensibility, the possibility of moral agency, the ability of thinking, of acting is possibly extinguished. So moral agency is endangered. Ethical reasoning is also in danger because workers may view themselves as only cogs in the wheel. We are insensitive to our moral emotions and what's happening around us. So in Herbert McCool's work, we are reduced to one-dimensional man. This is the first structural injustice. And the second one is rather straightforward. This economic view of time perpetuates coercion in the labor market. We all know that in real-world situations, free market is not free. There is much less genuine, meaningful choices of occupation are in place. Because there is a mismatch between job and job seekers, and because of shrinking workers' autonomy resulting from specialized tasks in a complex economic structure. Coercion exists in this case not simply because there are two bad options, either staying or quitting the job, but there is a lack of the right to a better career choice. There is a restriction of freedom. That's the coercion in the market. And the worst thing is that we hold the economic view of time. The long working hours driven by the pursuit of economic returns impose burden of getting more occupational information and searching jobs as they see fit. So our freedom in occupational choice is further restricted. This enlarges the advantages and the bargaining powers enjoyed by the employees. So we can see obviously there's a power asymmetry between them, between the employers and the employees, between the workers and the companies. So the third kind of injustice is that the narrow view of time that is conducive to economic ends not only prioritize the economic needs of the societies, but also exclude other normative values and commitment operating in our world. With little free time, workers are numb to the production and under constant readiness to work. It is conceived as a way of alienation that reduces the cost of dominations because it legitimizes the social conditions under which the domination takes place. They have no time for moral reflection. There is a greater risk of inappropriate behaviors. The lack of epistemic awareness contributes to the natural superiority and hierarchy of the organizations of work. And this in turn minimizes the workers' cognitive cost. The formation of moral knowledge is less likely. And because we have workers in the society, they should also have the right to make moral claims, make moral decisions, take moral responsibilities. And the immediate challenge is that at what level does free time function? How does it achieve the emancipatory effects? And I will say free time as such is neutral to different perception of the goods. But we can use free time is a voluntary use of time with appropriate and sufficient and motivational resources. We can encourage workers to make a better use of this free time. So an institutional arrangement of free time can certainly encourage some collective participation in workplace democracies. And in the final sessions, and I will deal with only two challenges, two objections. The first one is that if time is not for sale, it may probably be against the imperatives of market freedom. An exercise of freedom in economic transactions, namely the economic task of allocation and distribution, is threatened as workers are forced to work less as they want if we impose some measures like maximum working hours, some maximum working hours laws. My reply is that this is the market freedom in unjust background situations. In perfect scenario, all market activities are volunteer. It is neither coerced nor coordinated by a higher authority, and no domination should be involved. But under the current situation market, many workers are pressed to work longer hours. Markets initially promotes freedom by preventing a single group of individuals, and these individuals refer to capitalists, from gaining control of the means of life. And the claim to free time actually provide a way to get rid of their control or alleviate their oppressions. So, and the second reply is that the ideology of working hours is internalized. And we should not be accused of influencing the market situation and intervening the market freedom. And because it shouldn't have been the case. If we can really make use of freedom, we have the freedom to claim to freedom. And Bertrand Russell says we only have to work 4 hours a day. So I suspect that the work ethics in modern society is being subject to a certain kinds of working hard ideology. And please note that I do not offer a complete moralization of economy. I share the conviction that markets can be an effective and legitimate means for distributing many non-profit goods. But I think free time, when it comes to free time, we can have other way of achieve and allocate this kind of good. And the second objection to my point is that if we forego the economic field of time, there is a great cost of efficiency. It is not economically feasible in a competitive market economy. But I think this is not a strong objection as such, because it is compatible with knowledge-based economy. Our economy nowadays is evolving from the past. And in this day, many don't work in factories, and managers rely on employees to be more proactive to solve increasingly complex non-routine problems. Free time can be a good and valuable temporal resources to fix these problems. For example, if we have workers can have more flexible time schedule in working or working at home and save some time from commuting, traveling to the workplace. This can boost creativity and possibility and productivity. And this is not merely a happy coincidence. There is some empirical evidence support that, but since this is a conceptual here, I'm gonna skip this. So my final concluding remarks is that getting more free time is not seen as a mere redistribution of temporal resources. It is a radical move towards pre-distributions, and it is particularly important in maybe a way to think of how human can have true and genuine emancipations economically, socially, and finally politically. And I think that comes to the end of my presentation. Thank you.